Welcome back to our weekly series called Survive to Thrive, Live the Story You Create. What this is, if this is your first time tuning in, is a series of conversations where we explore the connection between one's personal narrative and the topic of resilience, grief, appreciation, the it factor, as well as probably hundreds of others by now. So if you're interested in checking out any of the previous conversations or any of the previous guests, please go to our YouTube channel, and that is Overcoming Odds. By simply searching that in the YouTube search bar, you'll be able to find a complete archive of all the previous conversations and all the previous discussions that we've had as it relates to this particular topic. Today's topic is interesting. Well, let me reframe that. It's interesting to me because this is something that I've been pondering upon for quite some time. And so I'm really interested in having this conversation with Casey Berman, Scott Mason, and Caleb Pearson around this question of how long does your voice carry on after you are gone? So as you can imagine, we'll be going down quite a few different rabbit holes when it comes to legacy and the different things that we want to leave behind. And ultimately, I think answering the question of why do we want to be remembered and why is now what we're doing and what we are not enough? Why do we have to leave certain things for future generations? But before we get into that particular discussion, just wanted to make a few quick announcements. And the first one being in regard to our work, and that is if you feel like our work has had any form of impact in your life or helped you see a world through a different lens, please consider making a contribution through our website at overcomingodds.today or leaving us a review on Facebook, LinkedIn, iTunes, Google, wherever you can find Overcoming Odds. That would help us because it would help us spread this message even more and get connected to a community of people that may or may not be connected to us just yet. And one final announcement that I wanted to make is in regard to an event that will be taking place on December 4th called A Musical Evening of Giving. This is part of an organization called the Breakthrough Show, where Overcoming Odds, along with another nonprofit, will be featured as two organizations that will benefit from this particular experience. This is a night where there will be quite a few different musicians and artists showcasing their talents. So if you feel like supporting our work or supporting the work of the Breakthrough Show, please go to the website below, purchase a ticket, and possibly attend if you have the time as well. And with that said, I wanted to welcome Jessica Dugas. I wanted to welcome everyone else that's joining us right now for this particular conversation. And now I would like to welcome the three co-hosts that are going to be part of this particular discussion. right, Scott Mason and Casey Berman. I saw Scott jamming out in the background there to the song. I'm assuming you like the soundtrack.
I may have you get involved in the selection of the theme music for all of my future podcast seasons. I have to say, your taste in music that I like is better than my own. How do you do that?
That's awesome, man.
You know what I like more than I do. I'm blown away.
I always enjoyed that process because I think there's something to be said about being able to put oneself in whatever the state that I want to experience. In fact, I remember recently a friend of mine, she asked me, she said, how do you pick podcasts or how do you pick books? And it was a fascinating question because I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. And I just said, I pick these things based on the way that I want to feel, not the way that I'm currently feeling, but the way that I want to feel. And she kind of just looked at me. She's like, wait, what? Like, I don't do that. So I find like everything, I mean, it's all part of the experience. And so including this discussion that we're going to have, and I know Caleb will be joining us shortly, but this theme that I really wanted to explore with the two of you, I honestly couldn't think of a better group to have this conversation with. Well, because Casey and Scott are back, so there's going to be, a little bit of a friendly back and forth fire exchange between the two.
Hatred. It's hatred. Love you, Casey.
I wanted to explore this because I don't think I've actually had this conversation with the two of you before when it comes to legacy and leaving certain things behind and how the current things are impacting the generations that are in front of us, the generations ahead of us. And so I wanted to maybe even start off by, once again, addressing the question above us, and wherever it goes, that's where it goes. So when you think about this, how long does your voice carry on after you are gone? Is that even an important element to the way that you live your life right now? And if so, why?
Scott, thoughts? I'll let you go.
I've got lots of thoughts about that. Thank you.
Let's hear it.
First of all, Jessica, one thing I would love to hear your thoughts on Oleg's music taste here too, because I think that they're aligned to some of the music tastes that you and I have, and the singers whose voices have endured for a long time and will be enduring indefinitely. I won't name any names here because I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing about it. But on the subject of musicians and their voices, one year when watching American Idol, the well-known actress and singer Jennifer Hudson was a contestant. And at one point, I think Ryan Seacrest, the host, asked her, Jennifer, why are you up here? What is your purpose in life? Or what are you trying to do? And she said, and she became so emotional, it was like tears were being held back. She said, the only thing that I want to do is be able to have my voice heard by the world. She knew somewhere inside that her voice needed to be heard. In preparation for this show, Oleg, I researched Hesiod, who was one of the very early poets from whom much of our knowledge about Greek mythology and religion arises. He was a shepherd, and he lived in an obscure part of Greece, and he had a brother, Perses, who he believed had taken away his rightful heritage. He talks about how, and this was obviously metaphorical, one of the nine muses, the people, the goddesses who guided art and inspiration and inspired the voices or the visions of those who were creating for the future, met him in a mountaintop and gave him the gift of his voice. So at around 750 BC, he began his career as an oratorical poet. And his words have stuck with us 3,000 years later. We're still talking about them. The story of him finding the muse, I think, goes as to the heart of your question. One time I was talking about zombie movies and post-apocalyptic films with someone that worked for me. And I may have shared this story on the show before with someone that worked for me while I was with the city. And I was telling her, oh, I would be so-and-so in this post-apocalyptic world. And I always say this, I'm the one you want with you when the apocalypse arrives. I'm strong, I'm tough, I'll make it through and I will help rebuild civilization. I'm good at that sort of stuff. She said, oh, not me.
Bold
I'll be
statement.
dead. Yeah. She said, I'm one of the background people, the ones that die in the first episode, or I'm in the horde of zombies that's just already died when the episode has started. So I do believe that there are people that believe that their voice or their impact, for whatever reason, just is there, that their purpose is to live in the moment, experience whatever they experience, maybe have kids or maybe have a job that helps the machinery of society move forward. But then there are those who are approached by a muse. And to me, those who are approached by the muse face a choice. Do you reach for her? Do you follow where she takes you? And then if not, okay. But if you do, then I believe that for those people, the imperative of having their voice last beyond their life for as long as is possible becomes an imperative. And by the way, people's muses sometimes may not take the form of a voice. It may take the form of building something. And so the creation of legacy through action, someone like Alexander the Great, or like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, those are people whose muses are in action, and they may be expressing their voice through the buildings, or if they're an architect, the buildings that they create, or the businesses that they build, or the governmental reforms, for instance, if you're a Bernie Sanders, that you hope to see implemented through your work. But specifically with regards to voice, the vocalization or the enunciation, the throwing out of our story into the world, whether through song if you're Jennifer Hudson, or if you through oratory, poetry if you're Hesiod, or through any other number of means, it's whether you accept the calling of that muse. And then if you follow it, the potential, of course, is enormous. Nearly, like I said, 3,000 years for Hesiod. But even if it's outlasted you by generations, the ripple impact of any voice standing out in the sea is potentially unlimited. Your voice may in turn inspire the next Hesiod.
Mm-hmm. So my question, I guess, for you, Scott, and then Casey, I would love to hear your perspective on this as well, is why is now not enough? Mason?
Yes, because for many people, I do think now is enough. Their voice may be in family affairs or just their job or whatever is before them in the moment. But I do believe that the purpose of a calling is for it to outlast us, to transform or change other people internally, or to change society, or to provide other people with frameworks or narratives. If the voice that we have is solely limited to those in our immediate sphere, then the possibility for impact isn't there. Now, there are many people for whom impact, I'm sure, exists purely as a matter of ego. And I believe that for those people, they may achieve the impact. But I suspect that the impact that they have and the legacy that they leave behind is more cautionary or ambivalent. But if the muse comes to you, it's not just because you have a gift that she comes to you. And it's not purely for the sake of legacy that she takes you on a dance. It's also because on some level or another, the gods only intervene if they want the affairs of humanity to change. The purpose of our voice is for changes that are necessary to actually have a chance to happen. And that, to me, is why many people, myself, strive, and myself included, I should say, strive to be able to have our voice heard for a very long time afterwards. We may not succeed. We ultimately may not determine how long, how far, how wide our voice's impact is. goes or will be felt, but we strive. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Casey, what are your thoughts?
So my thought, to answer it literally, how long does your voice carry on after you're gone? It could carry on forever. If you think about, and you need not be famous. Now, if we want to talk about famous people in history, that's one thing. So how nuanced do we want to get to voice and carry on? But if you think about people who are not well known, they're known by their family members, they're known by their tribe, they're known by 20 people, their voice carries on forever, for better or for worse. I think all of us have beliefs, consciously or subconsciously, that come from past generations, whether it's in our own family or whether it's from generations of culture, mother culture, as they call it. So my voice will carry on. It could go indefinitely, forever. That may not be a good thing. I might harm my children. They may pass it on to my grandchildren and great grandchildren. And it's some belief I had, which I took from my dad and mom, which I took from my grandparents. So my voice can carry on forever. All of our voices can carry on forever. Now, I know it's tempting to go to the voice of famous people, but I want everyone to know that we're all famous in a certain way. We're all well known in a certain way, and that your voice, there's a responsibility around what we say, even if it's just a small community, even if it's just your family that'll impact. So I think our voice carries on forever after we're gone. And so then that leaves us the choice of, how do we act? Do we want to build, you mentioned the word legacy. Do we want to think purposeful about it? So if Jennifer Hudson says she wants the world, welcome, Caleb. If Jennifer Hudson says she wants the world to hear her voice, my question to her would be, what's the message in your voice? What are the beliefs in your voice? So I think our voice carries on forever. And then it's kind of us as accountable to say what and determine what beliefs and what notions is our voice going to express.
Can you briefly touch upon the topic, which I find fascinating, where you talked about everyone can be famous in their own way? Because I know this is something I personally have found challenging, I don't know, for however many years, where I thought that fame only applied to those who have celebrity status or whatever it is. How do you personally understand that you can be famous in your own way? What does that mean to you?
Well, so let's look at this sentence. How long does your voice carry on after you're gone? It can carry on forever. The question would be whether people recognize it's your voice or not. So there are a lot of beliefs that I have that some monk in the 1200s, some rabbi in the 1800s, some person in 1930 expressed somewhere. They say we stand so tall, we see so far because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And so I don't know who those giants are. I don't know. Some I know. Some I know their names. Alexander the Great, Cicero, right? Willie Mays, right? There are people that in my life and that I read about, but there's so many people that have expressed beliefs throughout the millennia that I don't even know their names, but I am living their beliefs. I am living it. So when you say then how you can be famous, I think this has always been the case. But nowadays with the internet, we all have our tribes. And so we're all can be famous, even if it's just 20 people, even if it's a LinkedIn following, even if it's a podcast, even if it's just your family. So all of these little tribes we can be famous in. I think, many of us aspire to have millions of followers here or there and to be famous in, I don't know, when is the threshold, right? When are you famous? When are you well known? It used to be you had your name on a, in the 80s, I'm dating myself, you had your name on a paper, right? Time magazine or the New York Times. Nowadays, it's so democratized and so distributed that you could be famous on some Reddit stream and that brings you money, that brings you acclaim. So there's so many ways for us to be famous in a great way, because it opens up, again, democratizes it. But if that's the case, then your voice will carry on forever. I think one thing that I try to do is understand that I have been influenced by a lot of voices, a lot of beliefs, a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, for better or for worse. And I don't know who these people are, and I never will know who they are. So hopefully my voice and some ideas that I have, which aren't my own, they're coming from some other, I'm just a medium. Hopefully they'll impact people in 10 days, 10 years, in 1,000 years. And I can contribute to that.
A few minutes ago, and I want to thank everyone for your patience with me. The comments that Melody and Jessica put in earlier distracted me when you were asking me a question. I was really feeling them. And so for those of you who noticed that I was hesitating there, it's because what I was reading was impacting me. One of the things that particularly impacted me, that goes as to exactly what you were just saying, Casey, was Jessica's remark on 12:03 p.m. And that remark goes as to one interesting element of an ambiguity in Oleg's underlying question. How does your voice carry on? So it's not clear from the question, and I think there's beauty in ambiguity, whether the question and what he was referring to as being carried on was your voice or the voice that happened to be yours. How I'm understanding what both Jessica and Casey are saying is with regards to the voice being the message, the thoughts, the intentions, or the contribution to the overall social dialectics going on. And I do think that that's true. All of ours can go on forever, so long as we contribute to it. And so long as we are social creatures, I agree, we are contributing to it. However, to what extent are you merely repeating conventional wisdom or what a zillion other people have said without any twist of your own? Or to what extent are you adding your own twist on it? Even if it's a minuscule one, to my view, impacts whether the message or whether the voice is truly yours or the message of others that you are purely a mouthpiece of. And by the way, Melody, congratulations on accepting what your muse has offered you. I saw that comment too, and that in particular affected me a few minutes ago. A powerful statement.
It's awesome. Caleb, what are your thoughts on all this? Oh, you hit unmute. Oh. There you are. You're good.
There we go. Okay, we're good. Let me first apologize. It's a Friday.
No
I'm in my office. You see me, but no. I did think a lot about this coming into here, and I'm kind of understanding what Scott and Casey are getting at when it comes to your voice and what it's saying. Is it being heard after you're gone? And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott or Casey, but in the, I guess, thought of your voice, is that being your contribution to a life lived, interactions with those people and experiences in a life lived? Is that what we are referring to? Am I wrong?
No, you think you're correct.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, which ultimately is what your legacy, and whether you want to or not, my thought about leaving a legacy. Everybody does leave a legacy. It's how you're remembered. It's what you left behind. What people will say about you after you are gone, whether it's negative or positive, or whether you intentionally set it up to be that way or not. I think everybody essentially leaves one. But that being said, I think you can influence the outcome of your legacy. especially having knowledge that you're going to leave one regardless. And I think some people could say, I don't care how people think about me or whatever after I'm gone. But is that really true? To what extent do you really not care about what somebody has thought about you after you've been on this planet, you've had your interactions, and then you're gone? I think ultimately, deep down, everybody seeks approval or love or what have you from the people that they've interacted in their with in their lives, whether they've held them close to them socially or have loved them even. I think a lot of people want to know, well, what did you think of the life that I lived? Did I succeed? And then what did I impart? That's kind of where I'm thinking right now, and I'm going to be listening so I can contribute more to the conversation. But yeah, that's kind of where my head is right now.
Is it fair to assume then, and this could be a question for anyone on here as well as Jessica and Melody that's a part of this, that everyone is striving for a sense of legacy?
So I looked up the word legacy before I came here, and in the Latin root, it originally comes from the word ambassador. And so you would leave a legacy back then as an ambassador, or think of it as like a PR person or someone, your stand-in, someone representing you, someone telling a good story about you. And then over the years, it became leaving behind something, money, your will, your estate. And then now it's a bit more ephemeral, like, your reputation and so on, right? So, but when you think about where legacy really came from, it was this idea of, I want to, as Caleb was talking about, leave behind this is a good image of who I am while I'm alive, right? I'm going to send a legacy to Rome to do XYZ for me. And so this idea of wanting to be remembered, I mean, we see this in art, we see it in everywhere. And for many years, right? For thousands of years. And so I don't know if it's healthy necessarily that we humans need to worry about how people think about us. But to Caleb's point, we want love, we want approval. And ironically, we're thinking about the approval people are going to have for us after we're dead. We're doing that while we're not dead, while we're alive, right? So we all do it. It's natural. I think about it as well. I think the question really is, when you think about your legacy, what is the intention? What is the purpose behind it? Is it altruistic? Is it something where you want to help? Is it more of, I want a statue and I want everyone to think about me? Because that's more egoic. I think for me, where I am in my life at 47 years old and kind of shedding the ego, as we say, the second half of our life is unlearning. Second part of our life is unlearning most, if not all, that we learned in the first part. So I'm definitely there in that confusing spot. But I think for me, I am trying to be less concerned about a legacy, about how people think of me. That's gonna shape up. That's just gonna be whatever it will be. The point I'm trying to do is what you mentioned, Oleg, in the write-up for this and earlier, is being in the moment. Doesn't mean I can't record things. Doesn't mean I can't memorialize things and get it down to be remembered. Of course not. But for me, the more I think about, well, how will I be remembered if I do XYZ? I think what that does is it really impairs the motivation. It impairs what I'm doing at the moment. And so all of a sudden, now I'm thinking in the present and I'm thinking in the future. And so it's like meditating so that I can get better in my life. Meditation is about kind of connecting with another dimension, but now I want to take that so I can do well in this dimension. It muddles everything. So I think my voice will be best in the future, which really there is no future. There's always the eternal present. Like right now, like there really is no tomorrow. It's just now, happening now, and now, and now, and now. But if we want to use the word future in sort of this linear thinking, I would say then that for my voice to be, I guess, most beneficial in the future is for me to really be focused on the now, because I'll have the best intention. I'll be really just just here. Like if I'm in this podcast right now thinking about how people are going to think about this in a year from now, I won't be authentic. I won't be sincere.
Well, I think you bring up a couple points that made me think about this. First one is this concept of being remembered, and this is something that I either picked up from one of the books or maybe just personal realization or experience that I've had, and that is really you're only remembered by those that choose to take the time to remember. That was the first big realization that I've had. So even that part is not guaranteed. You may pass, but this is one I'll share briefly. A thing that I did for Casey, I don't know if Scott, you were a part of it or not, but essentially I put together this book for Casey to celebrate his life and the impact he's had in my life and so many other people. That to me is a form of remembering. That to me is passing down something to you in tangible form that you can then read and process and reconnect and do all these other things. But if I didn't take the time to do that, you would have never received that. You would have never known many of the things, which also I think ties into Melody's point here. And that is, I think there are those who don't delve deep enough to even think of their legacy. And that to me is an interesting point for a couple of reasons. And I would love to hear all of your insights on this. And that is, why is that? Is legacy too big of a concept that has been constructed for us to even have a conversation around? So that's the first question that comes to mind. And then the second part is that even understood? I mean, at the core, even let's say for the sake of this conversation, the four of us plus everyone that's in the comments, Jessica, Melody, and whoever else that's tuning in right now, do we even understand what it means to have a sense of legacy?
A certain ex-president said during a presidential debate, I'm going to be dead. I don't care about my legacy. And I think that he was sincere. He was, if nothing else, authentic. No one ever accused this particular president of being a phony. He was accused of a lot of other things, as all presidents are, but not that particular thing. And that goes as to what I believe is the truth the fundamental truth in Melody's statement. I do believe that not all of us are wired the same. Not all of us have the same mental capacity. Not all of us have the same concerns. And it can be easy because of the law of attraction for people who are like in their thinking, like in their capacity, similar in their interests, to gather and then assume that that's the way the whole world is. To me, Melody's point is a fair one, a reminder, not everyone is the same. And that is okay. They may not be concerned about that. That being said, moving it back to the originating question in this discussion, and in particular Casey's remark earlier, that doesn't mean that they won't have a legacy or that their voice will not last forever. There is something to be said about what Casey said a minute ago, understanding that we are truly living in the present only. The future is only a mental construct. And when we attempt to control what that legacy is, then we are acting in, as again, Casey correctly said, an egotistical fashion. And egotistical drives to having our voice heard ultimately lead, in my opinion, not always, but in many, many cases, to negative legacies. But so can ignoring the fact that we are part of a larger stream that ultimately leads to an ocean, that this conjectural future at any given time ultimately does come to pass.
Yeah. I wonder, don't delve deep enough. I wonder, like, I'm not sure I'm delving deep enough for a legacy. I think my legacy will be, again, whatever it is. And when I say I'm not concerned about my legacy, I don't think it's being flippant or not being deep enough. I mean, I think of the freedom fighters in France during the Holocaust. I think of so many of the unnamed people during the civil rights movement that we don't know their names. I think of all of the people. I think of the person in Tiananmen Square in '89 who faced off that tank. We don't know his name. I think of all of these people who have done so much. I don't know their names. There could be there's photos, possibly there's stories. And I don't know if they were concerned with their legacy when they did what they did. Maybe they thought about their children. Maybe they heard MLK and were just inspired. I don't know, but I'm not concerned if someone isn't concerned about their legacy. I think I think the legacy shapes after it, and I really admire and respect them for being in the moment. You can't think much about racing into the woods in France and with the Nazis chasing you. I mean, you kind of just do it, or you're with the collaborators, right? You don't think much about marching in Selma in the 50s. I mean, you just kind of get inspired and you do it. I don't think that person thought much about opposing the Chinese tank in Tiananmen Square. You kind of know it, you feel it, and you do it, and the legacy shapes after. So for me, I'm not too concerned about my legacy. I'm doing things right now that feel right, that I know help, and my legacy will shape. If people don't like me down the road, or they speak disparagingly about me, that's their projection on me. I wish it wasn't the case. To Caleb's point, we all want approval. It would hurt. But I think I have kind of been in the moment, like you said, Oleg, and I think the work I do, helping lawyers leave the law, the work I've done with my wife, with my children, for me has been hard. I'm not perfect. I'm making a ton of mistakes, but there is a muse. To Scott, to your point earlier, there is some muse. I didn't find it on a mountaintop, and the message has been a little staticky, and it's come in and out. But there's some voice that's not my voice, but another voice. Maybe it's my voice echoing back to me. I don't know. This is making me think. But there has been some voice when I left the corporate world, when I left law, that has steered me down another path. And I think for me, it's important as you're thinking about it, Oleg, you always ask very easy questions. But I think
you're welcome.
as I think through, this conversation is really helping me realize that, my legacy will be shaped kind of about what I do in the moment. So,
although I'm going to push back hard about one component of this, Casey, I ask that you actually re-listen to your own interview with me on my podcast, and I think that it will be very clear to you when you hear yourself that there was a muse on your mountaintop, and that her voice was clear.
Yeah. I need to. Yeah.
I'm finding all of this quite interesting because I mean I understand everybody's views, but I'm thinking, am I focused on the acts or experiences that I have had or will have that maybe strikes somebody's interest, that goes down to is the legacy not my name but what I do? Like you mentioned, Casey, there's so many unnamed people that have done extraordinary things that we just don't know who they are. Maybe I'm not so focused on what I'm doing, but maybe, like you said before, who's going to remember me, or what is my representation, my avatar after I'm gone? And do I care more about who it is that is remembering me, and not so much what I'm remembered for? For instance, I mean, I don't have any children, but I would love to think that my children would be my focus of legacy. Was I a good father? Did I raise them and educate them correctly? Did I keep them out of jail? Did I keep them safe? Are they happy? Did I impart the things on them that, wants them to do good things and be, whatever morally and ethically is to you in the world? Did I impart that onto them? So I think unintentionally, right? People do great things, and maybe they don't remember their name, but they remember what it is that they've done. But am I not so much focused on the act and more focused on who it is that I'm acting for. What's my avatar after it, and who do I want to see that avatar? Maybe it is just my children, right? Yeah, I'm living in the now for myself and for them, but I do know that someday I'm going to go, hopefully before they do. Will they remember that dad taught them this lesson? Will they stay away from this area because dad said, hey, I have experience here, I've lived it, this is going to make you better? Yeah, so I don't know, those are my thoughts on the topic. Maybe it's focused more on who's listening, who's hearing my voice.
Well, so then, Caleb, I have to ask, going back to the question at the top of the screen, how long does your voice carry on? Are you saying from a legacy perspective then that the length of time that your legacy carries is tantamount to the length of time that your avatar exists? In other words, the length of time that, as Oleg mentioned earlier, people are stopping and choosing to think about you because right, they're deciding to commit even a few seconds of their time to your memory. And if so, are you saying that you are comfortable, or the majority of people, perhaps, if you'd like to take it out that long, are comfortable with the legacy that they have with regard to their voice lasting perhaps until the generation after they pass away?
Yeah, or just within their bloodline, right? As long as that bloodline is there, and maybe if they've done something significant within their own family that said, "Hey, grandpa," or your great grandpa, or whatever. Because think about it, it's probably a whole lot more common than we think. I don't know what my great grandpa or grandmother did, or how they lived, but taking it back to what Casey said about the origin of a legacy. Think about Rome, emperors, right? Roman emperors wanted to be deities because they wanted to be remembered. It was an insult to have their names stricken from the history books because they knew that at some point their line would die out, or at some point somebody would forget them. Think about kings and queens, pharaohs of Egypt. Maybe the legacy is and the avatar is something that is symbolic, like such as a pyramid or a statue. We're going to continue to remember who that person was, maybe not particularly specifically the small things they did, but definitely the great triumphs that they did, because they're still physically around. We can see it, right? Christ, you have the cross. The legacy is in that. It's one of many symbols, right? There's the Bible and everything. There's one of many avatars, but maybe to go back to the question, the length to which one's voice carries on after they're gone is the longevity of the audience and the symbol that they've left behind.
Then I will say something that's radical and extreme, but I will throw it down right now. That is a tragedy. And I would even say it's potentially a moral crime. If it's one thing to be, and I want to make a clear differentiation here, it's one thing to act in the moment, to be thinking about others as part of a larger picture, and therefore being, for instance, the anonymous person who was marching on the bridge in Selma, and it was fire hosed down, or who was part of the freedom rides in the South and sacrificed their lives or their physical safety to be part of something that's larger, because that larger change required numbers of people in order to gain traction. That is nevertheless an intentional connection to a bigger picture, an intentional choice to be a tributary on the larger river, as opposed to saying my legacy is going to be that I was nice to my child, or I was this or that in my bloodline only. Because I will argue as well that there are movements and needs for everyone everywhere, and we all need to be involved, and we always have needed to be involved to the extent that we have the freedom and the capacity to do so. And so if we are making a choice to say that my legacy is merely going to be within my bloodline, and that my grandchildren remembered grandpa in a nice way, or that I treated my wife well, and that my children were raised well, well, you know what? You've met the minimal threshold for being a decent human, justifying your place on the earth. But all of us, except those perhaps with extremely limited capacities, or who may have been victims of some tragedies. I don't want to talk about those really unfortunate outliers, but all of us have the capacity to be part of something bigger than just what's in our bloodline. I believe and would like to argue that all of us have the obligation, if we have a voice, to at least try and be that anonymous person in something. You may not, as Casey indicated, have the gifts or the circumstances to become famous. So what? The world needs and has needed us. And the loss, incalculable loss, and human suffering, I will bet you, has occurred because too many people have made those sorts of choices about their legacy.
And I completely agree with you, Scott. I think it is it's a moral obligation for every human being to act, to get involved, to spread whatever it is in whatever movement, to act on behalf of those who cannot. But the tragedy, as you spoke of, is people don't. Or they're aligned the wrong, or I wouldn't say wrong, right? Who am I to tell you that you're wrong? But they're aligned in other ways. And there is lack of movement. The tragedy, but the true fact is just people don't. And it is unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. There is so much going on where every single person that is able could make waves, right? Could make waves by doing some of the most simplest things. And that could be part of their legacy. Mine, right? I just like probably many of you, all three of you, I maybe, like Casey said, he doesn't really worry so much about his legacy, but he definitely is an influencer. He knows that his words have weight. He knows he's affecting somebody, impacting somebody. He's got to be cognizant of that, right? What am I saying something that is going to push somebody into a new level over that threshold? It could be something as simple as that, sharing an experience. Even though I'm not worried so much particularly about how I'm remembered, but I do know that while I'm here, I'm having an impact. I choose to. And that's a big part of it, though, Scott, is choice.
Yeah.
There's a difference between knowing and choosing. It's huge.
And acting.
And acting.
Well, one thing that I just want to add is, when you think about your voice, and something that we've talked about, but one of the ways humans, and I'll make this history lesson very short and won't bore everyone, but humans jumped to the top of the food chain 100,000 years ago with our voice, with our language. Language and culture enabled humans 100,000 years ago to be able to collect all of our tribe together, make a plan, and send all the wildebeest into a dead end in a valley so that we could kill them and eat and take their meat and their hides, right? So a lot of animals can't do that. We do know some chimpanzees can take, they use tools, they take a grass and put it in and collect the termites and eat, but you don't see that many animals using language and culture in the way that we do. And we jumped. How did we become top of the food chain? With our smarts, with our tools, with our planning. That also made us very anxious. And this is what Harari talks about in the book Sapiens. How the heck in 100,000 years we jumped to the top of the food chain while these big tigers and lions and bears and all that we were able to kill them. We felt insecure. What it also did is now there's identity. There's your voice. There's Caleb's voice. There's Scott's voice. There's Casey's voice. There's Oleg's voice. There's Jennifer Hudson's voice. There's Jeff Bezos' voice. Which voice is more popular? Which voice is bigger? Which voice is more of an influence? And that's a rat race. I'm not going to win it. Who's going to win it? And so there's, for me, and I know we're running on time, so I'll make it short, but for me, I think one shift that I've made is to not really focus on my voice. It has made me dampen my ego and really realize that something is channeling through me. So I think we need to act. You need to get out there. You need to do this, right? And so if you want to teach your child, maybe start a blog, do what Oleg did, start a podcast like Scott, get out there and actually act on this inspiration. I think for me, the reason I'm not concerned with my legacy is not because of something I'm more enlightened than anyone else, not at all. I think I've really realized that the more I focus on my voice, the more I continue to separate us. And is my voice big? Do I have more followers than Caleb does? Is my voice out there? Now, you want metrics. I get it. We're all in this together. So yeah, I do want to see if people are following me. Of course, I'm not immune to that, but I have a foot in this and I also have a foot out of it saying it's okay. The voice is going to happen. That story is going to happen. And if it's just 3 people in 30 years that get something from me, then that's how it is. But I just implore everyone to realize that your voice need not be up against other people's voices, but that I think, because that just kind of perpetuates this separation amongst us all, but that do act and get your voice out there, but realize that it's actually part of the collective. Like Scott said, it's another tributary on all of us in the same river to the same ocean.
Wow to all of you for this conversation, and I think Jessica put it best. Such a great conversation today. I need to come back and take notes on this. I'm taking notes. I can see Caleb
Always
is
do.
taking notes. Taking notes, but there's so much to be said, and I think it really does require a separate time for a separate conversation regarding some of these topics. The one that I'm thinking of is significance. I know for me, and I don't know if the 3 of you can relate, there were times where I didn't feel my actions were significant, where I didn't feel my presence alone was not significant. And I think a large component of that has to do with what you just mentioned, Casey, the rat race, the thinking that, okay, just because I haven't achieved this, I haven't achieved any level of significance. Just because I haven't built an Amazon type company, therefore this particular company has no significance. So I think there's a lot to explore, but for the sake of time, I want to just briefly open this up to other avenues that people can learn more about you, connect with your journey, and I guess you could say follow your voice to continue on with the theme. And I will start with you, Caleb. What are some ways that people can do that?
Hey everyone. Yes, so I have a podcast called the Ignite Podcast. There's only 1 season out right now, but season 2 is geared up to launch very soon. And I'm definitely gonna have Oleg and Scott, the incredible Scott, and all his energy on season 2, and definitely you as well, Casey. So glad we got to connect.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can find Ignite on Instagram at _Ignite Podcast. You can also listen to all of the episodes on any major podcasting platform. You can also find it under the Shadows Podcast, under YouTube, or on Facebook, the Shadows Podcast.
Mr. Berman.
Yeah, you can find me at leavelawbehind.com. I'm a former attorney. I help unhappy attorneys to leave the law for a career that they love. I want to say, Scott, thanks for calling out that point about what we discussed on your great podcast. So I have to go back to that and learn from my past self. And Caleb, great to connect with you. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with you. But Oleg, thank you again. This is I've learned a ton here. You've really made me think.
Of course. No, thank you. Scott?
Scott,
by the way, threw a little bone to Casey when he was talking about leaving, but I don't know if you caught that, Casey. I think you remember it, Scott, right? Anyway,
I
sorry.
did.
Go on.
Casey just skated right over that.
No, I did.
He didn't want his legacy to be known.
So,
But I wanted it to be known because I think it's a powerful one, Casey, and it's already changed my life. Scott Mason's Purpose Highway is how you can find me. PurposeHighway.com. The world is changing, people. There are new movements out there for people who are seeking to build connection to others through the search for spirituality, ethics, and meaning in brand new ways. Are you ready to join those movements? Are you ready to learn? PurposeHighway.com.
I want to thank the three of you, and I want to thank Jessica and Melody and everyone else that's tuning in or will be replaying this. And as Jessica mentioned, going back and taking notes on some of the things. This for me was a very insightful conversation. I mean, there's much that I've pondered upon my own sense of legacy and my voice and what about it is important or what do I choose to give importance and meaning to. So I want to thank the three of you for starting this dialogue and Jessica and Melody for contributing to it all. And I truly look forward to the discussion that we have next week. And outside of that, just once again, want to thank you guys for making this happen.